Hi kids, it's Mr. M. Hope you're all doing terrific. We're going to pick up the story, The Junkyard Wonders, where we left off last week. But I did want to mention one thing. The story is actually autobiographical. The author is Patricia Polacco, and what that means is that this is a story of her childhood. A small chapter of it, and I think it's a wonderful story so far. It's going to be a great one till the end. And let's pick it up where we left off. You remember Mrs. Peterson took the kids to the Melvin Beach Junkyard, and that's where we're going to pick it up. At the junkyard, Mrs. Peterson stopped us. Now form into your tribes. Then collect everything that you think could be made into something new. Remember, Wonders, here's your chance. Forget what the object was. Imagine what it could be. Each of the tribes set off across the junkyard, collecting wheels, doors, handles, latches. We vanillas hadn't gotten just the right junk, though, until almost the end of our visit. As Jody, Ravan, Tom, and I were climbing over our last pile of assorted junk, Gibby called to us. He was standing under a shed roof looking up. There, hanging from the roof strut, was an old wrecked model airplane. "Gib, that's just a torn-up plane," Tom said, turning to leave. "No," Gibby said. "It's a beauty. I see it. We're going to rebuild it into something bigger, better, something wonderful, something that will defy gravity itself. This plane is going to fly all the way to the moon." There was such wonder in his eyes that we knew we had just what we needed. For the next few weeks, during the last hour of our class time, we worked on our new inventions. As we hammered and sawed and cut, Mrs. Peterson read to us. Great Expectations, David Copperfield, and sometimes poetry. But every day, Mrs. Peterson reminded us. Some people look at things the way they are and cry, "Why?" But I want you to look at things and see what they could be and ask, "Why not?" Gibby was the boss of our plane project. We removed all the outer skin, built in new balsa struts, and repaired a lot of the skeleton. Ravan replaced the old skin with pure silk. Finally, we painted the rebuilt plane with low resistance lacquer. But would it fly? The day came when we were to present our stupendous projects. The Cinnamon tribe was first. They unveiled a tangled sculpture of hollow tubes. "Well, Mrs. Peterson," asked the Cinnamons, "what is your invention?" "A vibraphonium," the Cinnamons called out. It took 3 people to play it. Fabulous. The Almonds made a hanging wall maze full of levers, fulcrums, and counterweights. When ball bearings were loaded into the top, they clattered down, bounced, shivered, and jumped as they ran through the maze. Stupendous. When the Lemons uncovered their device, none of us could figure out what it was. "This is perpetual movement," Dallas Schaefer gave his invention a shove. It leaned way forward, ringing bells, pulling at springs, and twisting back and forth. We must have watched that thing for 15 minutes. It just did not stop. When it was the Vanilla's turn, Gibby pulled the covering off. "But that's just an old model airplane," Booth's shipper called out. "Wrong," Gibby shouted back. "This here airplane is going to defy gravity. This baby is going all the way to the moon." Everyone laughed. Mrs. Peterson spoke up. "If Gilbert says it is destined for the moon, I for one believe him." "Come on, Gibby, will that thing fly?" someone shouted. "Oh, it will fly all right. We flew it like a kite off of Putnam's Hill," Jody trumpeted. We had. That was off a hill. For it to fly by itself, though, we need a propulsion unit. "He means a motor," I added, "and we found the perfect one. It will take the plane right into the sky. The trouble is, it's expensive." That's when the tribe stepped in. All of them. Mrs. Peterson asked the whole class if they'd help raise money for the motor. Everyone cheered. It was unanimous. They would. For the next few weeks, all of the moms made cakes and cookies and sold them at bake sales. Our dads sponsored car washes. All of us junkyard kids used things we had gotten from Mr. Beach's and made gadgets to sell. By that spring, we had made enough money to buy the perfect motor. The next thing to do was to set a date for launch. We wanted everyone in school to see it. That's when Gibby thought of the school science fair. Perfect, Jody said. He had started missing a lot of school, not feeling well. When he was there, Ravan was at his side. Sometimes she even helped him climb the stairs. We could launch it from the school roof, and it would fly right over the field where the fair is. The class cheered. Maybe, Mrs. Peterson said. But wait, this magnificent airship has to have a name. Everyone started calling out names like Fabulous Flyer and Windy Wings. Jody stood up. He sure looked pale. I think she needs to be called the Junkyard Wonder, because we made it out of junk, and because we Junkyard Wonders made it. That plane is us. It was just a week later when Mrs. Peterson was late. She was never late. Her eyes were red and she looked sad. Please sit down, I have some very bad news. There was silence. We have lost Jody Beach. He passed away last night in his sleep. Then she put her face in her hands and cried. How? I managed to sputter. Ravan and I held hands. Jody had a disease that made his body grow faster than it should. It just kept growing and growing so fast that his dear heart couldn't keep up. It just gave out. Later that day, the whole class went to the woods behind the school to collect flowers and to remember Jody. Now I know what the plane has to be called, a voice called out. At first we couldn't figure out who was talking. Then to our shock, we realized it was Ravan. None of us knew she could talk. He wanted it to be called the Junkyard Wonder. That's what it has to be. Tears rolled down her cheeks. All of us agreed. Gibby's dad mounted the motor on the machine and placed it on a table at the back of his workshop. When we saw it, we all gathered around. It was so beautiful. We tried it out more than once from the hill in back of Gibby's house. It seemed to work. But would it work from the roof of the school on fair day? And would we even get a chance to try? The stairway to the roof was always locked. Maybe Mr. Weeks, the janitor, could help us get to the roof. I think he will, Mrs. Peterson said, but it will have to be a secret. The day before the fair, we could hardly contain ourselves. Would newspapers be there? Scientists from a nearby university? We'll huddle together out on the playground, chattering about our plans for the lunch. Cheese it! Look who's listening, Tom warned. It was Barton Poole. He'd heard everything. He leaned into Gibby's face. Your dad wears skirts. Then he sneered. And no one's allowed on the school roof. Got it? No one. And I'm telling the principal about your plans. And sure enough, when we got back to our schoolroom, the principal was waiting for us, and Barton Poole was with him. I have been informed of your plans for the science fair, Mrs. Peterson. There will be no launching from the school roof, and no fuel-driven airplanes anywhere on the school grounds. It could be very dangerous. Mr. Weeks will keep your plane in the janitorial closet until the end of the school year. The principal turned on his heel and left the room. Mr. Weeks looked very sad as he carried the Wonder out of the room. Sorry, kids, he said. We were stunned. Ravan started crying. This was going to be for Jody, she whispered. Mrs. Peterson said nothing for a time. Then she began. We're going to launch the Wonder tomorrow, just as we planned, and from the roof. Mrs. Peterson told us to be at Mr. Weeks' closet tomorrow morning, the morning of the fair. Our secret weapon turned out to be Mr. McDonald, Gibby's dad. If Mr. McDonald stayed with us during the launch, the principal was okay with it. We couldn't believe the good news. Mr. Weeks handed the Wonder to Gibby's dad. Let's take her up, he said to us. On the roof, we could see the kids pouring onto the field to look at science exhibits that were being set up. where Van pulled gorgeous silk streamers that she had painted out of a bag and let them stay rolled up at the edge of the roof. Then, with Tom's help, Gibby and his dad put the Wonder in place. They carefully connected the engine to a car battery, then primed the pump to deliver the fuel from the tin sitting next to it into the engine. Then they pumped the fuel into the plane. We all stood back and watched. Maybe it'll go all the way to Lansing, I speculated. Maybe even to Detroit, Tom said. Maybe around the whole world, Van whispered. No, Gibby said with a grin. This baby is going all the way to the moon. When the whole class school assembled on the field, Mrs. Peterson signaled Gibby's dad to begin the countdown to start the engine. Mr. McDonald knelt in front of it while Gibby held the plane still, spinning the propeller over and over again. But the engine didn't catch on. We held our breaths. Pump the intake again, Mr. McDonald said to Gibby. He asked some of the boys to hold on to the Wonder. And you've got to let it go just at the right moment, or it will bank left or right. Understand? He spun the propeller a few more times, and then with a loud bang and a roar, the propeller started spinning. Blue smoke puffed out. Someone in the field yelled, and everybody looked up at the roof. That was when Ravan unfurled her banners down the side of the building. Almost to speed, Gibby's dad hollered. 10, 9, 8. When he got to 1, Mr. McDonald hollered, let her go. The Junkyard Wonder shot out of everybody's hands. It was airborne. First it went out over to the field, then as suddenly as it started, it sputtered and seemed to stall. Then the engine roared to life again with a noise that was deafening. The Wonder's nose pointed straight up and up, straight toward the sun. We all ran out to the wall of the roof and watched breathlessly as it streaked through the cloud cover, then appeared above, ever skyward straight to the stratosphere. We all watched until it became a speck in the sky. Then we couldn't see it anymore. Even though the science department from the local university was there, along with the school board and the newspapers, for all of us, it was only Mrs. Peterson that mattered. And Jody. Tears glistened in Mrs. Peterson's eyes as she watched the Wonder climb into the heavens. Like I said, Gibby said, that baby is going straight to the moon. That was a great story, and I'd like to read the prologue that went along with this that I think will really, it's really moving in my opinion. Mrs. Peterson has always been with me, all these years. So have all those in my tribe. Tom went on to become the artistic director of the American Ballet Theater Company in New York. Ravan became a textile designer and was eventually invited to Paris to design for the fashion industry. As for Gibby, well, he went on to become an aeronautical engineer for NASA. He helped to design the lunar modules for the Apollo missions. And me, I became a creator of books for children. For all of us, Mrs. Peterson was the wind beneath our wings. She was the alpha of our tribe. She was our compass. I saw Gibby in Houston a few years ago. We spent the afternoon recalling our time together in the Junkyard and how Mrs. Peterson helped us believe in ourselves. Then Gibby's eyes misted over. He leaned into me and grinned as he said, remember that photo that my dad took of all of us the day on the roof after we launched the Wonder? Well, Patricia, I stowed that photo aboard the lunar module on Apollo 11. All of us Wonders really did make it to the moon, after all. The Junkyard Wonders. Hope you enjoyed it.